Lovely. Okay, so welcome everyone. How exciting today is. It's a special event. It's the PKO. We have a special meet for you today. And you can see the three panelists are Adam, Maria, and Brett. They are partners like yourselves, and they're stepping up to show their knowledge, to show their expertise through a couple of sessions that are very interesting, and we highly recommend them to you. My name is Angel. I'm based in UK. I work in MuleSoft as an architect, and I will be one of the moderators for today. We also have Maguire. You probably have heard of him. He's very active in the meetups community, and is also one of the leaders for the online English group. He comes from ThirdEye Consulting, and he will be moderating as well today. One additional thing, I wanted to say thank you for joining us, for dedicating this time to the session, and I know it's going to be valuable, so please keep tuning with us. Before we start, that's a welcome message. Welcome again to the MuleSoft community. And with that, we can see the agenda for today. It's fully packed as usual, so you have the intro of what the MuleSoft community is about, some exciting announcements, what is the green offices leveraging Internet of Things with MuleSoft and Salesforce? That's the session from Adam. And we will get the Hub&Spoke Architecture with Salesforce from both Maria and Brett. A little bit more about the MuleSoft community, about what it is again, this community is already 50,000, as you can see in the screen, MuleSoft practitioners, that we say that they learn together and support each other. And there's different resources you will see through this 5 minutes introduction about it. And the reason what this is valuable is because there's a lot of diversity on the background of the people that are working together on those forums, on these resources. So you get a place where you can share and evangelize your work, meaning your personal brand. You can show your skills, you can build your reputation, and you can help others. It's also the second point there, learn and get inspired by how others are actually using the Anypoint platform. An example of this was 2 weeks ago when we were doing the integration challenges. That was a very good example of how different professionals are facing challenges and how they overcome them with the Anypoint platform. And also you can get inspired for the best practices. And the third one, most important, network with MuleSoft experts. This one is usually easier when we're face-to-face, and that will happen this year, hopefully, and we will be able to build more connections. Now, one thing that we always said, join us at the MuleSoft meetup. You can join us as a panelist, you can join us as a speaker, as a leader, you can join as an attendee. We value all of your interactions because you are the end person that are utilizing the Anypoint platform, and you have challenges and you have experience that you can share and others will find valuable. So keep in mind that, again, for this year, the MuleSoft meetups were 100% virtual, and the meetups by itself are a community-led event. It's for developers, by developers, for architects, by architects, for consultants, by consultants. And it's the place where you can learn together. There's an important point there that the Muleys are here to support you. For any amazing volunteers that want to step up to run these events, we have Mariana Lemus in the call. She's already mentioning there how important and valuable it is for us when you're stepping and organizing the meetups in the region. Again, the content that we're going to see today is for you, and we base on the feedback that you give us in the surveys at the end of the session. With that, another point that is very important, the meetups can be about anything. It could be customer use cases, it could be a demo, it could be a sneak peek into something that is still a beta, it could be about how-tos. Even in some cases, we have seen hands-on workshops. Everything is possible, and it depends, again, on your feedback. And you as a leader, you as a attendee, you can propose to do a session on one of these types. Imagine doing a hands-on workshop of service mesh, for example. Okay, with that, Manik, I will give the mic to you so that you can talk us a little bit about the global online groups that are very interesting, especially on these times of since last year.
Yeah, thanks, Angel. Yeah, you said it rightly. Like since last year, everybody was locked down into the home and everything went online, right? And that is the time when online meetup groups started having almost weekly sessions with different topics. A few things changed after that. We had some more online groups, like we had a Spanish online group, which already had their few events. And something new that came in is Portuguese online group that is brand new. And we are so excited to look forward for the very first event on that community, right? So apart from that, something new happened past February, which is a new group got launched, like Women Who Mule, that is purely with a partnership from the community leaders from Accenture and our MuleSoft ambassadress Alexandra Martinez. You must have seen her almost everywhere, and she's amazing, like her contribution. So yeah, that is a very new group to help all our women babes, architects, muleys, and to share their knowledge and experience with rest of the community. So if you haven't joined any of these groups, it's very easy. Just go on the link there and you can hop in there. Could you go to the next slide, please, Angel? Oh, thank you. So, MuleSoft ambassadors. We have now all total 28 ambassadors, and these are the new 8 joining us this year. You have seen all of their contributions. These faces are not new. They are very active members of MuleSoft community, and I personally have learned a lot from them, and I am sure you all must have seen all of them. So these are highly recognized MuleSoft professionals. They hold at least one MuleSoft certification. If I cannot say like all, most of them have like a all certificates there. So you can always go to them for any guidance or help you need. They are always reachable in there. With that, if you want to see their contribution, you can always find it on the MuleSoft blogs, the meetups, and the tutorials for it. So that's an amazing contribution to the community. Angel. Thank you. So this is something new. You must have seen this one in the PKO event today afternoon, sorry, MuleSoft Mentors program. This is for the community, and like Angel was saying, driven by community. These are very special people, very knowledgeable, that hold lot of knowledge about the MuleSoft, which you can easily go to and get their guidance from it. So MuleSoft mentors are active community contributors. They are meetup leaders, speakers, ambassadors, or like everyone who engages actively with the community in there. These similar to our ambassadors, they also hold at least one MuleSoft certification, and they are very dedicated to the community. For understanding more about this program, you can go on mulesoft.com/community and you can find all the things that you need to know about this new program. So we definitely suggest and recommend visit that link there. Angel, next, please. Yep, thank you. These are the different ways that you can enter into the community, right? There is not just one channel. There are so many channels that you can interact with the community. You can answer questions on the forum where almost every developer in community stops by, either to answer their own questions or ask more questions, and all the experts are there. So you can participate on those forums. There are various blogs that you can contribute to. Blog, of course, blogs.mulesoft.com. You can always go there, find what you need, and if you want to contribute to that blog, those are also welcome. Just reach out to Mariana and the team, and I think it can be done. Don't forget to follow us on Mule Days. And our brand new, not new anymore, it's been there for a while, MuleSoft developers page on LinkedIn. So please don't forget to follow that so you can be up to date with any news, updates, and everything. And follow us on Twitter at MuleDay. With that, Angela, I think it's time for next one. Yeah,
Yes.
please, your turn. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Anik, for all the review from the online groups to the ambassadors, to the mentors. And with that, we're going to start the session. You can see the two sessions for today. The first one from Adam, IoT with MuleSoft Salesforce. Let's leave it like that so there's some suspense. And Maria and Brett, Hub&Spoke Architecture with Salesforce. Now, before we start, just a quick heads-on about the speakers that we have today. First of all, thank you, Adam, Maria, Brett, for jumping into the community, stepping up, doing this share of knowledge session. And I'm going to do a very quick introduction about each of you. I just don't plan to sabotage yours. It's just so that the community have another understanding as well. From Adam's point of view, Adam is originally based in Europe. He's a full stack developer with specialism in integration and DevOps, as well as a strong working knowledge of best practice, the software design principles, and patterns for corporate enterprise clients. Several years of experience designing, developing, and deploying secure RESTful APIs while leading teams of developers spread across multiple continents. There's a bunch of technologies that Adam is certified on: AWS, VCCS, GCP, ETL, MuleSoft, Salesforce, Boomi, and Scrum Master certified. He's also a meetup leader for Belfast. Thank you for that, Adam, for leading the community there in Northern Ireland, and have a high level of involvement in the MuleSoft communities. From Maria point of view, Maria, I think that you're still based in Connecticut, back in the US. That's why we have a mixed speakers today, globally distributed. Technology architecture senior manager at Accenture. She has worked in many different roles, including delivery lead, technical project manager, lead solution architect, integration API architect across multiple industries. She specializes in integration and API technologies and working with digital technology and API strategy projects. One thing very interesting about Maria, and you can ask her about it, 15 years working, more than 15 years working with Accenture, and that has to be a lot of exposure both to markets and customers. Many stories have to be there. Brett, based in Nashville metropolitan area, more than 15 years of experience in database development, analytics, data integration, and delivery technologies, skill in SQL, SAS, Oracle, MySQL, RDBMS, systems and architectures, experience in OLAP, data visualization and KPIs via SSRS, business objects, Tableau, and Kili. Experience with ATL data integration, OLTP systems, and of course, the branch of cloud solutions, SAS Cloud Platform, Salesforce.com, AWS, DynamoDB, Hadoop, and so forth. With that, it's a quick introduction for the three panelists that you're seeing today. Again, thank you all for stepping up and making this session for the community. And with that, Adam, I will give the mic to you to start our first session. For the questions, please leave it open in the chat. And I believe, Adam, please just confirm that you would like to have those questions asked to you through the session instead of waiting up to the end.
Yeah, we'll do a Q&A at the end, but if questions come in and they're relevant about the slides that I'm presenting, by all means, fire them at me. We'll see how that goes. If it gets too chaotic, we'll park them and pick them up at the end. But no, first off, thank you very much, Angel, because that's probably the best introduction that I've ever been given. I'm massively humbled, so thank you for that. I'll start sharing my screen here as well, I hope. Yeah, there we go.
That was on my end. I needed to stop the screen. Now you should be able to.
I was wondering if we'd fallen down at the first hurdle. Okay.
Excellent. So, we can see it and we can hear you perfectly.
Are you able to see the PowerPoint presentation now?
Yes, sorry. Infrastructure, analytics, green up.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the starting slide. This is where I'll kick off. So I guess as a very quick introduction, ThirdEye are probably the smallest partner in the ecosystem, but we like to pride ourselves on probably being the geekiest partner in the MuleSoft ecosystem as well. And I think over the course of this presentation, I'm going to show you what we mean by that. We're going to be talking about green and sustainable offices with MuleSoft, Salesforce, and IoT. So as Angel mentioned, yep, my name is Maguire Wilson. I'm the CTO over at ThirdEye, and I also lead the MuleSoft practice, founded the MuleSoft made up for Belfast, MuleSoft certified developer, architect, and one of a handful of instructors in EMEA as well. So our agenda for this presentation, we're going to be looking first at IoT using HTTP, our green office, how we retrieved the data, created a network of sensors, and then fed that into Salesforce IoT. Then we're going to start talking about IoT using MQTT. And if MQTT isn't familiar at the minute, by the end of this presentation, you'll at least understand what we're talking about when we say that. We're going to talk about our sustainable office, retrieving data, and then Salesforce Sustainability Cloud as well, which is a new Salesforce cloud that was released, I think, towards the middle part of last year. But I think the vast majority of people still haven't come across it. And yes, as Angel said, if there are questions that come up, fire them into the chat. Otherwise, we can talk about them in the Q&A at the end. So first off, our green office. We're a startup and we have that startup vibe, I guess. We have that startup culture. And one of our cherished traditions is that when a new joiner comes and joins us at the company, or we sign a new client, or we partner with a new company, everyone gets to select a plant from Forest, London. It's a little boutique plant shop, I guess, near our office. And they get to place it in our office, and then we look after it. And it symbolizes the relationship that we have with these employees or with these partners and with these clients. And it got to the stage that I think we have probably about 40 plants now. It's growing quite rapidly. We're actually looking for a new office at the minute. And I'm not sure if that's because we ran out of desk space or because we ran out of plant space. Probably plant space first. But yeah, so we've got a lot of plants. And that's what I'm talking about when I say our green office. This isn't about ecology at this stage, sustainability. We'll talk about that later. Green office for us is because our plant is literally green. There's a lot of life in there. And like the people and the relationships that the plants represent, each one is unique and they all have specific needs. So some of these plants like a lot of light, we have them beside the window. Other ones prefer the darkness. Some of them need to be watered every 2 days. Some of them need to be watered every 2 months, like a cactus, for example. Now, around March of last year, the UK went into lockdown. We could no longer go into the office and people could no longer look after their plants. And it became increasingly challenging to keep all of these alive. Our founder, Jeff Stanky, he was tasked with going in and nourishing our plants. And to say that was a bad idea is probably the understatement of the century. I love Jeff to bits, but he does not have the green thumb. He is not the best gardener that I've ever come across. And to kind of put that into perspective, my own plant, I have an elephant ear plant that I selected. I went into the office probably towards the end of March, and my plant looked very different. There were stems in completely different areas. It was not a plant that I was familiar with. A couple of weeks later, I went back into the office again, and my plant had actually shrunk. And again, for anyone who's not overly clued in on plants, generally they grow rather than shrink. So I asked Jeff straight up, Jeff, did you kill my plant and buy a new one, hoping that I wouldn't notice? He's never admitted to this, but I'm 99.999% certain that he did indeed kill my plant and just bought me a new one. So we need to come up with a new solution to keep our plants alive. We wanted to see if we could use the technologies that we use every day, Salesforce and MuleSoft, tie that in with IoT and come up with a really innovative use case that allowed us to monitor these plants and ultimately keep them alive through the worst times of the year. For the real techies, I've got a formula for plant health there. Plant minus love equals death. So that's the formula for how to look after your plants. So the first thing was retrieving the data. The mission, should we choose to accept it, was to regularly retrieve, transform, and send plant data to Salesforce in a scalable way to gain meaningful insights on the plant health. The scope was to retrieve data from multiple locations, e.g. offices, employee homes, and each location may have multiple sensors. So we started off getting these little wired sensors that you could hook up to a Raspberry Pi. Initially we were running cables between the Raspberry Pi and all of the sensors. As this started to scale to various plants, it became not just a health and safety issue because there were wires, trekking across the office. It also became incredibly unsightly. And we also ran into another issue with these cables that are about 1 millimeter thick of copper. There's only a very finite distance that the signals will transfer before you see performance degradation. So we actually started seeing packets drop as we were trying to hit these sensors, and we were losing data the further we separated the sensor from the Raspberry Pi. So after researching and iterating through a number of different solutions, we found wireless plant sensors that were Bluetooth enabled They come with a mobile app, but what we managed to do was use Python to essentially spoof the sensor. It pretended to be the mobile app, and then we were able to retrieve the data from the sensor. We put a MuleSoft API on the Raspberry Pi as well, which was able to reach out using the Python 3 scripts to scan the area for any of these sensors and then retrieve the data from the sensor as well. And then we put it into Salesforce. And how that looked was like this. We would have a Raspberry Pi sitting within a cluster of plants. We would have a Mule System API leveraging the Python API to transform the data into our canonical data model. And then we had an IoT batch scheduler as well, which orchestrated the retrieval and sending of data to Salesforce at a user-defined frequency. And for any of the architects out there who love a sequence diagram, this is how it looked. We had a trigger, which was the time. It sent a request from the IoT scheduler to the Mule API on get API v1 plants scan. That would send the request to Python, and it would scan the area. It would use Bluetooth to scan the area for any devices that met our format, and it would return the MAC addresses back to the scheduler. The scheduler would then send a request out to the Mule API with the MAC address as a URI parameter, and then that would return, it would again get passed on to Python. Python would reach out to the sensor, and it would retrieve the data and return it to the scheduler, who would post it to Salesforce as a platform event. Data. Pretty nifty. Once we started showcasing this, first off internally, but then to a client, everyone in the team started hounding us saying, okay, well, we want these sensors in our houses as well. You know, at this stage, the office was already shut down. Everyone was working from home, and pretty much everyone in our team has plants at home. I think a lot of people on this call probably have plants at home as well. And they can be a bit difficult to look after. You know, you do need to pay attention to your plants, and we'll actually show later on what the advantage of these sorts of sensors are. So we needed to come up with a scalable solution here. We needed to create a network of sensors that would allow us to, you know, basically set this up for clients, set it up in homes, set it up in our own office, and grow this application network. And this is what it looked like. So we still had the system APIs sitting on the Raspberry Pis. We introduced a process layer, and we split these out into what we referred to as master nodes and super nodes. So it was the same process API deployed at two different levels, the master node and the super node here. The nodes which were sitting on the Pi were responsible for finding the sensors nearby and retrieving the data. The master nodes had an array of the super nodes within that subnet. So this could be a client site, and this could be our own office. We would have a server set up with the process API deployed to this server. This would be the public-facing gateway over the internet. You know, we didn't have to expose all of our Raspberry Pis over the internet. We could expose one server, have all of the data coming into this master node. It would be aware of all of the nodes within that network, and it would reach out to those, aggregate the response, and then forward that up to the next level. So the super node here was deployed to Cloud Hub, the exact same process API, but instead of having an array of nodes, it had an array of master nodes. So this was aware of the ThirdEye homes, the ThirdEye offices, the client site, all of the servers that were dotted around that had public-facing APIs, and then they were in turn responsible for the nodes within their network. This allowed us to send a request from Salesforce to Cloud Hub and retrieve all of the data from all of the sensors. Equally, we were able to reach out to Cloud Hub with a single MAC address for a sensor, and it would search all of the APIs, all of the nodes to find out where does that sensor reside, and then retrieve the information from it. And then again, because everyone loves the sequence diagram, the trigger in this instance was a HTTP request. It would reach out to API v1 plants. The super node for each of the master nodes would send a request to get API v1 plants. We used the parallel for each in MuleSoft, so that allowed us to keep the request synchronous, but allowed us to execute it in parallel, so we weren't having to wait for, you know, n number of requests to come back. The master node in turn searched for all of the nodes, sent the request to get API v1 plants, which in turn scanned the area. So every cluster would return an array of MAC addresses. The node would reach out to each one of those MAC addresses, return the single sensor data, aggregate it, feed it up to the master node, which would aggregate it between the multiple nodes, feed it up to the super node, and then return the data either to Salesforce or to a consumer. And what that looked like was this. Once we got the data into Salesforce, we had the MAC address, we had the moisture state, which I'll touch upon later, and then we had the sensor data as well. So this was able to track moisture, luminosity, temperature, soil conductivity. We were even able to retrieve the battery level and the firmware installed so that we could make sure that we were updating the sensors when required. We had the scheduler set to run every 10 minutes, and in all honesty, that was definitely overkill. Plants don't tend to change very often, never mind every 10 minutes. We ran into some issues with Salesforce because for anyone who's particularly well versed on Salesforce, there are storage limits. We were trying to put all of this data into Salesforce so that we could track the levels over time. And if you want to add additional storage to Salesforce, it gets very expensive very quickly. So what we did was we set up a scheduled batch Apex job, which migrated the data from the standard object into a big object. We then used another job to merge several objects into a denormalized Einstein dataset. And then we used Einstein dashboards to show the graphical historical data. So we actually found a Git repo that had 20,000 plants on it and the relevant thresholds for each of the values that we were tracking. So you can see here we have a max moisture level, a min moisture level, and then the data is able to be tracked as well. Theoretically, it should fall in between, but it didn't always, as you can see here. And what was the result? This is a before and after. So shout out to Therese, who I think I've seen on the call. This is Therese's plant. Therese now works for MuleSoft. This is called a monkey jar plant. On the left, you can see one little monkey jar, and this is before it was being monitored. You can see on the right here, we have a thriving plant. This is one that was being monitored. It was getting all of the attention, the love that it needs. It was getting all of the light it needed. And as soon as the water level dropped below a certain threshold, it got watered again. And you can see the impact that had. So Salesforce IoT and adapting to changes. We were using Salesforce IoT in order to track the moisture levels. So when the events came in, if it was above a certain threshold, it was high moisture. If it was below a certain threshold, it was low moisture. If it was in between, it was sufficient. If it got too high or it got too low, it would raise a case using field service lightning, and then the relevant owner of that plant would get a notification saying, you need to do this to your plant in order to get it back into a healthy state. We found out last summer that Salesforce IoT was being retired in October 22, and that forced us back to the drawing board. We needed to come up with a new solution in order to do the IoT orchestration. And we actually looked into a number of different solutions at different IoT platforms. In my own home, I use Home Assistant. It works quite well. It's a very good solution, but it doesn't have the sort of enterprise level features that we needed for our own office. And what we came across was called ThingsBoard. So ThingsBoard is an open source IoT platform for device management, data collection, processing, and visualization of IoT projects. It allows you to control devices via RPC, via remote procedure calls, and it also supports HTTP, MQTT, co-op protocols as well. In all honesty, I have no idea what co-op is, but if anyone here uses that, you can rest assured that ThingsBoard supports it. So MQTT is the message queue telemetry transport protocol, and it was actually created in, I think, the early 90s for the oil and gas industry. It's a very small, lightweight messaging queue, essentially. You can publish and you can subscribe, but it's absolutely perfect for IoT devices. And if you're doing any work with IoT, even if you have IoT devices at home, there's a high probability that it's currently using MQTT. So at this stage, I'm just going to pause and show you what ThingsBoard looks like. So hopefully you guys can still see this. If I go in and look at the devices here, I'm gonna have to log in again. The joys of a live demo. If I go in and look at the devices, you can see we have 4 plants here under Project Vita, a rubber tree, an olive plant, a cactus, and one called Sabrina. If I look at the dashboards here and go down and look at Project Vita, if I open the dashboard, you can see that we have the temperature, we have the lumens, so how much light is being picked up by this plant, and the moisture level as well as a percentage. It is quite dark in Belfast, which is why the lumens are pretty low here. This one is in the kitchen, so either my dad has the kitchen light on or there is a Aurora Borealis localized to my own kitchen. Simpsons reference for anyone. But yes, this is ThingsBoard, and it is pretty impressive on what we can do with that. Once we got that set up though, we started thinking, okay, how can we push this even further? What are the use cases that we can also feed into ThingsBoard, integrate with MuleSoft, have the data in Salesforce? So we started thinking, and this use case came about probably in December 19 was when this was a bit of an issue. Our office was pretty cold, no doubt about that. You know, it was a big office and there were small radiators. We'd got electric heaters for everyone, and these were 2 kilowatt heaters, 2,000 watts. And to put that into perspective, that's about 25 times more power than my laptop is using at the minute. And one of the issues we had was people would go home and they would forget to turn off their heater. We would come back to the office, 3 heaters would still be running. The office would be absolutely roasting. The plants would probably be nearly dead. And we'd be exceptionally fortunate that a fire hadn't broken out overnight. So when we started thinking about what else we could use IoT for, one of the things I thought was, okay, well, what if we could track the power consumption of the various desks? And then if we had the devices set up so that we could kill the power at a certain time, we would mitigate this issue. You know, we have a pretty good work-life balance. Everyone leaves the office by about 5:30. We could set up a job so that at 6 o'clock, all of these desks, all of these power sockets, I guess, are killed. There's no more juice going to them. We're not wasting electricity. We're not killing the environment, essentially. So again, first task was retrieving data. In this, our mission was to leverage IoT, MuleSoft, and Salesforce to gain a deeper understanding of the energy consumption across various devices and use the insight to adopt greener usage habits. The scope, again, was to retrieve data from multiple locations, and each location could have multiple sensors. We looked at a number of sensors, but the one we settled on was Sonoff POW R2, and you can see I have one of them sitting beside me here. What we've done here, actually, this is a standard extension cable, I guess. We've cut it in the middle, and then we fed it into this power sensor. I know we have Americans on the call, and Americans love to sue people, so I will caveat this by saying, do not try this at home. Use a licensed electrician if you're going to cut power cables and things like that. I've blown up more sensors than I care to admit, so I am not taking responsibility if anyone manages to try this and blow up one of their sensors. Do use a trained electrician, please. Now, the sensors themselves, they do have a REST API, but because ThingsBoard supported MQTT, we wanted to see if we could leverage MQTT as well. Out of the box, these sensors don't support that. So what we did was we got a serial to USB adapter, and then we actually flashed custom firmware onto these sensors. So it's called Tasmota. We will share this deck afterwards and people can click through. But Tasmota is an open source firmware for Sonoff devices, which allows you to configure MQTT to send this data to an IoT orchestration platform like ThingsBoard. Our ThingsBoard instance was hosted on Google Cloud Platform. We were using Kubernetes, Kafka, Redis, HA Proxy, Zookeeper, Postgres. It is a very enterprise-ready solution, and it is open source, as we mentioned previously. So at this stage, you know, we had the tools, we had the software, and we were able to get the data into ThingsBoard. We didn't have the connection now set up to Salesforce. And Salesforce was where we were doing the field service lightning to raise the cases. We wanted to use Einstein Analytics, and we wanted to really dig deeper into the data using Salesforce. So there were two solutions that we could do here. ThingsBoard has a HTTP REST API, so we could go and build a point-to-point integration between ThingsBoard and Salesforce, or we could get slightly more creative. And being the geeks that we are, we decided to get creative. So we use Salesforce Connect and OData. And for anyone who isn't aware, Salesforce Connect allows us to connect to external objects, which behave similarly to custom objects, except that the data is stored outside the Salesforce org. So previously, I was talking about the limits that we ran into in regards to storage. ThingsBoard uses a Postgres database as its data store. Those tend to be very, very cheap. Storage is incredibly cheap on the Google Cloud Platform, especially compared to Salesforce. So we were able to outsource the data. We were able to put that into a Postgres database, but we were still able to access it in Salesforce as if it was a native object. It enables users and the Lightning platform to search and interact with this external data. Every Salesforce org can have up to 100 external objects, which is plenty for most use cases. And it relies on an external OData source definition that maps to a data table on the external system. So what is OData? OData is a platform agnostic and industry-wide standard, standardized by OASIS, ISO, IEC approved. It's a URI-based query language based on REST with standardized data representation and metadata. So what that allows us to do is we can create generic clients that work for any OData feed, and that's what Salesforce has done with Lightning Connect, with Salesforce Connect. It relies on HTTP or HTTPS, so it works across proxies and firewalls, and the metadata is used to retrieve entity names and field properties. Version 4 is the latest version of the OData specification. We're leveraging V2 as it's the latest supported by MuleSoft, but it's absolutely sufficient for most use cases. In MuleSoft, there is the OData plugin. It's the API Kit OData extension. It works with anything beyond Mule 4.1.1 and Studio 7.1.4, so providing you're not 3 years behind, you should be okay. It's a plugin via the UI in Studio, and it builds services from entity data models. So what you do here, if you look at, this is the standard package structure that people will be familiar with from Anypoint Studio. You create the OData.raml file first. This is your EDM, and then it automatically generates the API.raml and the OData library.raml as well. Once you right-click on it, Mule generate OData API from raml types. It works fantastically well, and again, makes our life nice and easy. The responses that we get can be filtered. So this is one of the big advantages of OData. We can pass in query parameters that allow us to order by, take the top, filter, format, select, do inline counts. You can see in this request here, we've done a filter with 2 different device IDs set up. So it's really, really powerful what you can do with it. And again, because it's agnostic, because it's standardized with the responses, any consuming application can go in and can leverage this, providing it's set up to handle OData. Salesforce Sustainability Cloud, as I mentioned, it was a relatively new product last year. Salesforce actually approached us last summer, I think it was, said, we've released this new cloud. We don't really know what to do with it. Can you and your geeks go have a play about, come up with some innovative use cases and see what you can do? We said, absolutely, that's what we love to do. And this is what it looks like. So it allows you to track, analyze, and report environmental data to help you reduce your carbon emissions and drive sustainability. It reduces the time and effort required for accurate carbon counting, and it's preloaded with multiple reference data sources from the US EPA, DEFRA, IPCC, and many others. To kind of highlight the benefit that this brings, one of my friends works for the strategic operator in Northern Ireland, and they're responsible for all of the electricity that comes into the island. They have about, I think it's 5,000 servers in their data center, and every year they have to do a carbon audit, and they do it in Excel at the minute, and this takes them about 3 months to do. They need to go and track, and they can't even track it with real values. They have to compare what the energy provider has told them they've used, what the server providers are telling them their servers should be using, crunch the numbers together, and try and put together an estimate on what their carbon emissions have actually been. With Sustainability Cloud, we're able to feed that data in, and we're able to automatically get those reports. And I'm going to show you how that looks now. So if I look at Salesforce here, the first thing that I want to do is just show you how easy it is to set up an OData connection. Once you have the API set up and published, and again, we've published this to Cloud Hub, you can set up an external data source. And if I look at the data source here, you will see that we've got things board, and you'll see our very familiar cloudhub.io domain being listed here. We're reaching out to this API, and we're pulling in the metadata. If I then look at the external objects, we can see that we've set up objects for devices and for telemetry values. And if I click into one of these, you can see that because it's OData, because the responses are standardized, Salesforce has automatically been able to generate the custom fields and relationships based on that OData API. If I jump back now and look at the devices, you can see we have 4 of these sensors set up at the minute. If I look at the workstation, for example, we can go and look at the current reading. And again, this is being pulled in real time from Thingsboard, and the devices are feeding this into Thingsboard every 10 seconds or so. We can see the breakdown and see that on a daily basis, the current power is 61 watts. On a daily basis, up to 63 watts now, so this is live. On a standard day, that's going to use about 1.5 kilowatts of power. That's going to cause 401 grams of CO2 to be emitted, and that's going to cost about 23 British pence. That's about 30 US cents or 0.000056 Bitcoins for anyone who's interested in that. We can also see that over the course of a month, that's going to use 42 kilowatts. Over the course of a year, that's going to be 516 kilowatts. And we're actually going to be emitting quite a lot of CO2 just with, I think at the minute, this is one server is plugged into this sensor. And that's costing me about £80 a year to run. If I look at the Things Board tab here, we can see the historical data as well. Again, this is being pulled in. And then we can look at the metrics. And you can see over the course of the last day, this is how the power has spiked. If I look over the past 7 days, we can actually see a pattern start to emerge here. Every day at 11:15, there's a spike in power. And that looks to be pretty consistent every day. You know, data is being touted as the new gold or the new oil. Data is the most valuable commodity that we have at the minute. And this kind of highlights that, you know, without having this visibility, I would have no idea that my server was consuming additional power every day at 11:15. And once we seen this, I actually went and investigated, well, why is this happening? And it turns out that there's a batch job set up on the server, which moves all of my files from a cache onto the actual hard disks. So that allows us to make more strategic decisions as well. For a lot of energy providers, the price dips between low usage hours. So generally between midnight and 6 a.m. or something, the price that you pay per kilowatt consumed drops quite significantly. So when you're armed with this data, then you can set up the jobs to run between those hours, and you can actually reduce your energy bill, all thanks to this data. We can also see that a couple of days ago, the power level dropped quite significantly too, and I'm not entirely sure why that was. Maybe someone stepped on a lead or something and killed it, but it is all there. Equally, we can look at the telemetry values, and this again is being pulled in by MuleSoft from Thingsboard. And if I look at one of these sensors, we can see the readings for today, the readings for yesterday, what the average load is, what the voltage is, and what the amps are and things. So once the data is going in, then we can start using Sustainability Cloud. And if I go and look at Adam's house, we'll see that we have 4 sensors set up as part of my house, 4 devices, all of these electricity, all of these power sensors. And you can see as well the energy use records. So for every single day, we actually compile the totals from all of the devices and we save it as an energy use record. And if I drill down into this, we can see that I think yesterday, for example, I consumed 3.42 kilowatts of power. Because this is tied in with external data sources, we can actually see what that drill down is as well. So from that 3.42 kilowatts, how much of that was based on the location, how much was from a biomass, how much was from coal, how much was from gas, how much was geothermal, how much was hydro, equally how much was nuclear, oil, solar, wind. And all of that's being fed in automatically by the Sustainability Cloud. Equally, if we did have, if we were able to hook this up to our aircon units and things like that, we could see how much cooling was using, how much diesel was using, how much fuel oil was using. It's a really, really, really powerful platform. But the other advantage that we have with this, if we flip back to the related, as well as the daily usage reports, there's also a compiled carbon report. Where is it? Yeah, so the carbon footprint here, and this is looking at the fiscal year for 2020, and it's compiling the data from all of the energy use records. So when I'm talking about my friend having to go and spend 3 months in Excel sheets to try and compile this information, Salesforce is now doing that automatically via an integration through MuleSoft into Thingsboard, and then the sensor data being fed directly into Thingsboard. And so again, we can see a total for 6 tons of carbon have been emitted by my house alone, which seems absolutely terrifying. But I guess it is what it is, and I'm not even a particularly heavy user. So it kind of does give you a bit of an awakening on how much impact we are actually having on the environment as we do this. So on that note, I'm going to flip back to the presentation and talk about some of the insights and intricacies that we've picked up as a result of doing this work. So some questions and things that we've discovered. How much does it cost to work from home? We're all working from home at the minute. If we had these sensors set up, we could all see how much energy we were consuming from our workstations. And then, can we invoice that, our utility bills, to our employers? I was told firmly, no, I can't. But in the future, maybe that will be an option. The slightly scary thing is that the employer can now see when you're at your desk working. So when I'm at home, I have 4 monitors hooked up to my laptop, and that consumes a certain amount of power. If I step away for 10 minutes, those screens go into standby. And if someone looks at Thingsboard, if someone looks at Salesforce, they can see the power level has dropped significantly, and they know that I'm no longer working. To kind of highlight that, I won't name him because I do believe he is on the call. One of the people that we had working on this, I was sitting watching TV at 11:30 one night. I turned off my TV and I instantly got a text message from one of the guys who was working on this project, and he said, "Have you just turned off your TV?" And I was like, "I have. How did you know that?" And he said, "I seen the power usage drop." So there is a degree of creepy, intrusive surveillance that comes with this, but I do think that the data is worth the cost. As I mentioned, we can see unusual behavior. So device consumption spiking at certain times, 11 p.m. for a home server. Does it make sense to run power-hungry tasks at certain times of the day? It absolutely does. It will reduce your energy bill if you're on one of these tiered pricing models. The other thing that we started thinking was, at what point does it make sense to upgrade to an energy efficient version of an appliance? And how long does it take for the energy savings to offset the cost of a new device? What are the additional costs? So what I mean here is, when I first plugged in the sensors, I was using my desktop PC, and my desktop PC is about, I want to say 14 years old now. I built it, I'm not going to tell you what age I was because that would reveal too much, but I was a lot younger when I built that PC, and it is not energy efficient in the slightest. When I turned it on, I seen that it was consuming about 650 watts. And that's compared to my MacBook, which is using generally less than 100 watts, somewhere between 70 and 80. And the MacBook is probably about 8 times more powerful than that desktop PC. So using this data, we can actually start doing a bit of complex maths to work out, well, if I went and bought a new MacBook and I retired my old PC, how long would it take for me to actually be paying for the MacBook through the savings in energy costs as well? It's still quite a while, but if you have it for long enough, it will pay for itself. The other thing that we started thinking was, what energy savings could be made when devices are not left on standby. This was a bit of an awakening for me again. Once I started seeing that it was still taking 20 watts when I had my TV, my sound system on standby, all of a sudden I started going and I just started flicking the switch and turning that off at the power source, because there's no need for us to be not just wasting the money, but also polluting the atmosphere as we go with this. So there's a lot of wastage. And one of the things that, how we kind of termed this ourselves, was having these sensors is almost like, it's the same sort of effect that a Fitbit or that a wearable has had for people's health. When people started getting notifications saying, okay, you haven't stood up in the last hour, or you've only done 5,000 steps today, people started getting out more, people started going and exercising more. And once I started seeing the data, once I started seeing how much wastage there was because of my own behaviors, it was an awakening for me. And I actually went and I changed my habits because of this. So I think in the future, we are talking about smart homes, we're talking about smart offices. I think there's a lot of benefits that are going to be had from here. And I definitely think that MuleSoft has a critical role to play in this as well. And on that note, that's the end of our presentation. We do have a blog up on our website. So if anyone's interested in reading a bit more, http vita thirdeye.london. You will need to do HTTP. We don't have a redirect for HTTPS, and Chrome will try and route this to HTTPS, which will fail, but it is on the website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So by all means, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation, particularly if you're playing with IoT, because it is a favorite pastime of mine. But on that note, I will hand it over. If there are any questions that have come through, by all means, let's discuss them. And if not, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Excellent presentation, Adam. Very, very, very interesting to see how you're using the different technologies to build something to solve a problem that you were finding within your offices, in your own life, because that's one important key of being an engineer, of being a computer science, is you try to apply what you know to what you see around. And having this issue around the plants, I admit I'm also a victim. I do have a house with more than 60 plants, and trying to figure out which one it has enough moisture, which one has enough light is a nightmare. So thank you for the very insightful presentation. And I think we have a couple of questions here that I think you will find relatable. The first one is from Hardik Jaina. It's around if you were using Python scripts sitting inside your Mule APIs, or if you were using a separate executively on the Raspberry Pis.
Yep, very good question. So we wanted to use the scripting component to run these natively as part of the MuleSoft application. Unfortunately, and I don't know if this has changed since, but I suspect that it probably hasn't, the scripting component in MuleSoft supports Python 2. It doesn't support Python 3. So we were leveraging libraries that required Python 3. So we actually had to set this up as a separate executable on the Pis, and then we would call that from the MuleSoft API. Again, maybe that's changed since, but the last time I looked, it hadn't.
All right, thank you for that, Adam. I will need to check that as well. For the next one is from Diraj Singha. You must have had a lot of challenges during these implementations. Do you have one or two that are the biggest ones that you can think about?
The biggest challenge, particularly with the plants, was these wired sensors that we had in the first instance. You know, when we were trying to run wires, little cables across the office, people were tripping up over them. It was an absolute nightmare. The second biggest challenge was undoubtedly being told that Salesforce was retiring their IoT orchestration platform. That came at us out of the blue. We were not aware of that. Thankfully now, I don't know if anyone's subscribed to the Salesforce updates, but as of a couple of weeks ago, they've got a lot better at sending, you know, notifications saying this feature is being retired 2 years from now, and we're going to remind you about this regularly. So I think I got an email last week saying that API versions 11 through 20 or something are being retired in the next year. And they said that they changed their notification model. And I was delighted to see that, because that was, it broke everything essentially. We had to go back to the drawing board and try and set up a new IoT orchestration solution, but it was for the best. You know, Salesforce is a fantastic platform, but it doesn't need to be the be all of everything. It doesn't need to have functionality for every single different use case. Using something like Thingsboard that's specifically set up to handle IoT orchestration, we get a lot more benefits because we've been forced down this route now.
Excellent, thank you, Adam. That one, this one, the next one is around from Tim Kimber, and it's actually mostly a comment. I'm familiar with MQTT. I work in the lab where it was invented, and the inventor worked in the same department as me. So if you have questions around MQTT, there's Tim Kimber in the line. No, sorry, Tim, just so everyone knows. Okay, the next one is from Todor Bogdeva. Do you have any additional costs on MuleSoft or Salesforce side when utilizing the OData solution?
Yes, so not on the MuleSoft side. So again, you know, you pay for your cores and you can use those cores however you desire. Salesforce Connect it's a premium feature. It's licensed separately. I think the base cost is 5,000 USD per month per object. But again, reach out to your Salesforce account execs and they'll be able to guide you on that better.
Yeah, excellent answer, actually, Adam. I added as well the documentation to OData in case anyone wants to implement it from the MuleSoft side, so you have to reference that. Okay, there's another question. When you were actually showing around OData, you were using Postman. What tool do you use for integration or functional testing? Did you reuse Postman or did you use another tool?
We use Postman for pretty much everything. I am a massive fan of Postman. We have Postman collections tied into our DevOps processes, and every single commit that a developer writes gets Postman collections executed against it to ensure that there's stability, there's regression tests. So yes, we use it during design, during development, and all the way through, you know, even production APIs. We have Postman collections that reach out as a health check just to make sure that the API is still functioning on a regular basis. So yes, I'm a big fan of Postman.
Because that was actually a cheeky question from my side, because I see it a lot with the customers that are struggling when they're thinking about what are we going to do, and you already have tests doing with Postman by developers, right? You developer already did it, so you can reuse it with a Newman plugin, and that's it. You can script it and add it to your Jenkins pipeline or whichever automation tool you're using. Okay, from the next one, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask, like, I have one question for Adam.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had a Thingsboard in there, Adam. So was that the same thing you used for notifications when something goes up and down or some critical thing changes is in the matrix? How did notifications came to you? Was it from the native Thingsboard or something else was used?
Yep. So when we were doing it before ThingsBoard, we were using Salesforce Field Service Lightning, which allowed us to raise these cases. ThingsBoard does, when we implemented ThingsBoard, we could set up the orchestration, to automatically send an email. But we love Salesforce. Salesforce is a fantastic platform, so we still have that being done in Salesforce. And this was the reason why we wanted to use OData and connect natively into ThingsBoard. We wanted to be able to execute Salesforce logic, on these objects on the ThingsBoard data as if it was natively on the platform. And thankfully with OData, it gives us that ability. So yes, we still use Salesforce for the notifications and the warnings and the your plant is about to die messages that thankfully we haven't seen in quite some time now.
Oh yeah, it's time to send an ambulance. Plant is dying. Let's send it.
Yeah.
That's cool to hear. Yeah, nice. Thanks.
Okay, Adam, there's a last one that is, well, this was mostly a comment from my side because I really enjoyed when I saw the questions that you put. There's an important part of the data capturing, right? That is, what are you going to do with the data? What are you trying to do with the system? And the analysis that you did or the team did for the energy part, when you have those spikes during the morning, and then you realize you start asking the questions, what is going on? What is happening? And then you say, like, how can we do it better? It's a batch jobs that we're running at this time of the day, scheduling. We can just schedule in during the night, and we save costs without doing anything, without losing any of the capabilities we have right now. That, I think, is key, and it's very hard for many in the business when you think about CIO dashboards, when you think about metrics framework, KPI. So I really enjoyed that part of the session. I just wanted to give you a shout out on that one, and for the community to realize that how important that specific section of the questions and the dashboards are.
Data is incredibly valuable, but you need to be able to have these dashboards to drill into it. It's only as valuable as the insights that we can draw from it. Everyone has data everywhere. Companies have an infinite amount of data sitting on data warehouses, data lakes, et cetera, and it's only now through the likes of Tableau, Power BI, et cetera, that we're actually able to drill down to that and draw the insights, see the patterns that otherwise you wouldn't be aware of. And that's why, again, I'm such a fan of IoT, because it's allowing us to get even more data about things that we would never have thought. I've had that server running for about 4 or 5 years now, and I had no idea that there was a batch job being run every night. I just didn't know that it was doing that. Once I seen this spike, I was like, okay, I need to investigate what's going on. It's Unraid. If anyone uses Unraid as an operating system, it does this. You have cache drives, you have for solid state, you have hard drives. I just thought that the data would move across at any time. No, it's set up on a schedule. And yeah, as a result of that, we can tweak the schedule and make it even, there's a chance that you could make it even more performant. If we had that server and it was being leveraged during the day by a whole host of other services, then there's a risk that that job would put the other services in jeopardy. There's a lot that can be done with data, but like you said, it needs the visualization, and MuleSoft's an absolute amazing tool at being able to unlock this data ultimately.
Okay, Adam. Well, thank you again for the incredible presentation. Please, community, if you like it, just pop it in the chat. Adam will appreciate it as well. We put the link as well to the project beta. You can reach out there if you're interested in learning more. As Adam said, you can reach out to him, and you can open up the website and you will see all the contact details. With that, we're going to move on. Adam, you can go through the chat because there's plenty of shout outs there, so you will be happy to read them. And with that, we're going to move on to the next part of the session. Manik, I think you want to take it from here, or?
I think you already introduced well, so probably Maria and Brett can start it, right?
Fair enough.
Yes. Thank you, Adam. That was a super interesting presentation, hard act to follow. But we will take our audience from the exciting world of plants and sustainability to the maybe slightly less exciting, but just as important financial services. All right, so let's reframe our thoughts here a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Are y'all seeing my screen?
Not yet, Maria. Are you able to share in the bottom? It should be next to the video.
Yeah, it's all right, hold on a second. Yes, all right, I got it. Okay.
Excellent. Now we can see it, but it's not presenting full screen.
I'm gonna put it in presentation mode in a minute here. All right.
Lovely. We can see the screen and we can hear you perfectly as well and see you as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So yes, our topic for today is the hub and spoke architecture with Salesforce and MuleSoft. Angel did a really good job of introducing at least me. So I have nothing too much to add to that, except I'm a technology architecture senior manager at Accenture, and I'm also one of the founding members of the Women Who Mule meetup, which was the brainchild of one of our Accenture leaders, Nisha Sharma. So another shout out to the Women Who Mule meetup group. Please join if you're a woman, if you're an ally. We talk about personal stuff, professional development. It's all very cool. Brett, you want to quickly say a few things?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be hard to follow up with Angel, how well he introduced me. But I have been at Accenture just now 2 years, but I do have 15 plus years in data integration. You know, it's really interesting presentation there with BI background. Really, data is key, so I fully understand that. Been in with MuleSoft now for just over a year. I've got my MCD and MCIA certification, and just continuing in the wonderful world of MuleSoft.
All right, thank you, Brett. So we will jump right in. So this is our agenda for today. We are going to talk, like I said, this was a project that we did for one of our Accenture clients, financial services client. So we will talk about a little bit about the background and the objective, what we were doing. Then we will get into what do we mean by hub and spoke architecture here in this context. Very briefly touch on the Salesforce object model. Talk about the integration patterns that we use in this project. A little bit about, again, touch on the type of streaming events that we use in Salesforce, because this was largely an event-driven architecture. Then we're going to get into a little bit of the meat of it. We're going to do a slightly deep dive into our integration designs, which Brett will present. And then finally, some of our key findings and design considerations. So go right in. So Accenture was brought in to this financial services clients to do a proof of concept. And you're like, okay, proof of concept for what exactly? Well, Salesforce, the vendor, pitched a hub and spoke architecture pattern to the client. And they said, and this whole, even though it was Salesforce led, making any kind of pattern like this work is going to depend on integration. So it was a pretty important Salesforce MuleSoft use case here. So they were so the client, before going in and investing in this whole hub and spoke model, wanted to do a proof of concept to prove out that it would even work if we scaled it. And we did finish the POC a little bit while ago, and right now we are in the middle of the implementation. A few things have changed from the way we did the POC, but the POC was so interesting by itself that we decided to focus our presentation on that. So the concepts we aim to validate were centralizing all data in one Salesforce hub org, which is called a massive org, and then sharing data between different Salesforce orgs. And then how do we integrate the client's client master database where all their customers are with Salesforce? So this will all get a little bit clearer as we go on. What is the hub and spoke here? So this is the most important concept here. The hub and the spokes are all Salesforce orgs, all right? Salesforce instances. And the hub is here shown in the center. And the spokes are the three on the side here. And for the POC, we only did 3 spokes, but a spoke, consider that as a line of business org, right? So in this case, we had the wealth line of business and the consumer line of business and the wholesale line of business. So each one of them had their own instance of Salesforce, which was the spoke. The hub was not tied to a line of business. That is purely a technical concept. It was a hub org. One of the things that the reason the client again wanted us to do a proof of concept was because it's going to be expensive to stand up another Salesforce org because they didn't have that. And they wanted to make sure that if they do that, it's worth the investment for them to stand up yet another Salesforce org because they already have so many. We only use 3 in the POC, but they have like close to 9. So that's what we wanted to prove out. So this is a hub, 3 spokes, and we also have the client master database. And there's MuleSoft integrating data between all of them, right? Salesforce object model. Now, neither Brett or I are Salesforce people. So we had a mixed team of Salesforce professionals and MuleSoft consultants on Salesforce consultants, MuleSoft consultants. So this diagram was put together by our Salesforce team. I'm not going to get into it in detail. There are just a few things I wanted to point out. So Salesforce, we use the financial services cloud of Salesforce. What that means is it's built specifically for financial services institutions. And the thing with that is because it's built for financial services institutions, it comes with some standard objects. It comes with some custom objects for financial services, right? So what this diagram shows is there are 3 types of objects: standard, which are standard to all Salesforce instances; FSC objects, which are specific to only if you have financial services cloud; and then custom objects. So we couldn't get away with just using the standard out of the box. The team also had to build some custom objects for this effort in Salesforce. So please don't ask me any more questions besides that, because that's I stole this diagram from our Salesforce team, and they would actually answer all the questions on this one. So the thing with this one is this is the integration patterns that we use and the use cases, okay? So you're like, okay, you've got all this hub, you've got this spoke, you've got a database. What are you going to try to do with this now? So we have 4 different use cases, and each one of them had slightly different integration patterns. So our first use case that you see here in red was the client data. So what they wanted to do was, like, if a new client was created in one of the spoke orgs or a client was updated, you wanted to use MuleSoft to send that information to the client master database, wait until that that information has been committed, and then you're like, okay, fine, you integrated with your client master. But the interesting thing that they wanted to do after that was they're like, okay, one Salesforce org made some changes to this client, but I want everybody else to know about it. So what I'm going to do is the client master is going to trigger an event and send it to the hub, and then the hub will pass it on to the rest of the spoke orgs, except the originator, or they can send it back again, it doesn't matter. So basically, anyone can update and everybody else gets the information because the hub has it. The second one, our use case, was referrals. So when one line of business wants to refer a customer to another line of business, they would normally just do a point-to-point connection. Oh, somebody in wealth thinks that somebody in consumer should get this business. So let's put a point-to-point connection between this org, spoke org, and this spoke org. Well, that's not that'll result in a whole bunch of point-to-point. So what they said was, no, everybody has to go through the hub. So if you are sending a referral to another spoke org, you have to go through the hub, because the hub then has the centralized location of where all the referrals. If you want to do reporting or something, you can do it from the hub org. Cases. The third use case. Cases is just things like, you open a case with the financial services institution because you're working on something with them, right? So that's a case, an active case. So that's just something, again, every line of business has their own set of cases. They want to view it consolidated in the hub. So then what we did was had a little batch job that ran periodically to sync all the information from each of the spoke orgs to the hub so that you can report out of it later, or you not even report. It's more like have a central location where you can go and see everyone's cases. And similar thing with activities. If you have an activity that is going on your account, activities are things that happen on your account. They're not necessarily active, like cases are. They may, once a case is closed, it becomes an activity. So then you can go and get some historical information. Or actually, okay, this activities use case is a little different from the others because there's no actual data movement here. It's just like a view only thing, where if you're in the hub org, you can view the activities centrally to all these spoke orgs. And that is the one use case that did not use MuleSoft, didn't require it because there was no actual movement of data. It was just viewing. So we kept that use case in this presentation just because we wanted to show that even if you have MuleSoft, you don't have to use it for every single Salesforce integration use case. Some can be done just by what Salesforce itself has in the box. Oh, this is a really important topic that I wanted to cover really quickly. So a lot of this is event driven. We'll get into that in a bit. So like when a new referral comes in, it generates an event in Salesforce that MuleSoft picks up. So there are multiple types of events that Salesforce generates: push topics, platform events, and change data capture events. Push topics we very early on eliminated because they are a predecessor to platform events and they're very less scalable and less flexible. Platform events is the one which we ended up using most of the time because they're very scalable and flexible, and you can code towards them and things like that. We'll get into that in a bit. CDC events called change data capture events, we use them, but there are a lot of lessons learned from that. We would advise you to use them very, very cautiously, because the reason is that these are not events that you can control. These are more like triggers on a database, right? So if something happens in Salesforce, it just triggers a whole bunch of events. Whereas platform events, you actually control them programmatically, what generates. So we thought it was a very, Salesforce architect on our team just pushed us to use CDC. So we did use it, but we ran into issues that we will talk about here. All right, so now with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Brett to talk about all the use cases that we talked about, like the clients, referrals, and everything. We're going to show you what we mean by what actual MuleSoft components we developed for those. So Brett, you want to take it over?
Sure. Yeah, so for the part, this first slide here is our first part, which was just more of a traditional approach with a REST API to provide the client data from Salesforce to the client master database. So MuleSoft components are pretty basic here. We had a REST API, which was MuleSoft with a JSON object model, the database connector that handled inserts and queries to the database for the client master transactions, and then a response that would come back from the REST API providing the database object record ID that then Salesforce can use as a typical client to update its own object model. So this was part one of our client master integration. And next slide. Part two is the more about a near real-time integration using the platform event out of Salesforce for relationship data flows. So it starts with Salesforce. Salesforce is having this platform event. MuleSoft subscribes to it through the replay channel connector utility that then receives that replay channel. There are some notes about this replay options. There's three actually replay options where you can choose on these subscription channels, all meaning all messages, regardless if they've been processed before or not. Just two would be only new, where that would then could use an object store to determine what is new and then only process those messages via that replay ID that's received. And then the third option is from replay ID, which means it's looking for a specific replay ID that you can put within the connector to only start from that replay ID and forward. So what we did here was the only new, we were on a Cloud Hub integration, so we were able to use the object store within that to keep things in order. So I would also recommend you looking into what deployment model you're going to use here, Cloud Hub or on-premise runtime fabric. They all could, Cloud Hub is most accommodating with the object store we found. But this within the POC, we were on Cloud Hub. So then that once the channel receives the platform event, then it goes to the database, does a query for additional party relationship, party information, and creates an insert of that data from the platform event provided. The payload from the platform event provides that to the database, and then gets this the ID that was created back on the database and sends that back, as well as the account relationship details, and sends that back to another object, the account relationship, or the account contact relationship. We had a few use cases here, a few different platform events firing into addressing different data relationships with our client master integration.
Yeah, so let me just interject here a little bit. So you'll notice that we have two different integration patterns just from integrating from a spoke to the client master database. Here it's just a call out to a simple REST API, says, hey, take the, add this party information or update it and give me a response back. Whereas here, there's actually a platform event that MuleSoft reads. It's not a REST API. It reads this platform event, updates it, and goes back and gives the result and updates it itself. So you may be wondering why we did that. Well, our Salesforce architects were like, we only, in Salesforce side, there's a little extra coding that you have to do, service call out, to call a real-time API, versus it's much easier for them to just drop an event, a message on a platform event. So they said, unless we really need to do a service call out, we need a synchronous call where we have to wait for the data to come back before proceeding. We don't want to do real-time calls, right? We just want to put it in a platform event and forget about it, right? So that's why we call these near real-time. So they just put it in the event, in the platform event, they go ahead and update, and MuleSoft reads the update and goes and writes it, right? So that's a slide. Just wanted to show there's two different integration patterns based on this use case in Salesforce. Next one.
All right. Yeah, then comes our hub to spoke integration. So this would be using our CDC change data capture integration from the hub. So this process flow in the middle, the MuleSoft has a subscription channel connector for a CDC event, and then receives that and goes into a choice router to determine which Salesforce org and object to route the message to based on the payload that was received in that change data event. That object could be multiple. It was multiple within our use case, account, contact, financial account, multiple objects that could then go observe that data. It creates a Salesforce create operation, so that basically inserts the record into Salesforce, and then additional data off of that creates the upsert operation for updating additional data within this object. So a couple things here within this change data capture, which was different, as well as being able to choice route to multiple spoke org from one single hub event. All right, next slide. All right, and this is a referrals integration. So this one has a few pieces with MuleSoft. The first is a process flow application that is basically handling the platform event listener. It's a subscription replay channel connector that for each org it will have a channel that is connected to each org that receives that, and that's its main job. And then also receiving data back from the referral API, the response back from the referral API in order to upsert back to the destination referral or the source org that sent the original payload to it. And then the main functionality really after the process flow was a referral API, REST API. It handled routing of that message to the destination spoke org. So that could be multiple spoke orgs here. We just have one for this example, but there were multiple to route to, determined by the payload it received from the process flow. And then also updating the hub. It would always update the hub with the identity record from the spoke that it received and that it did the upsert operation to for the destination. So kind of keeping all of that intact in the hub was the main job of the referral API as well as the upsert operation. So
yeah, so sorry, Brett. Yeah, I just want to point out that the reason you see 2 Mule artifacts here instead of 1 is we wanted to make this referral API a reusable API that can be called by someone. If some line of business wants to refer a customer to Salesforce, they don't even have to be a Salesforce, system. They could be another system, and they could call the referral API. And just as a background, we had to, this is where we wanted the reusable API-driven architecture, which took a little bit of effort to explain to our clients on why to design it this way versus just a bunch of a single process flow that just takes it from one, all the bunch of LOBs and then puts it in the hub. So just something, where in the Salesforce world, you have to be careful that you do not, it's very easy to do a bunch of point-to-points. You have to try to put in reusable APIs where you can. So that's why you see it something like this. Sorry, Brett, go ahead.
all right, I guess we go to the next slide here. All right, for our cases integration, this is a batch integration pattern. So no platform event. It's more about a MuleSoft scheduler that then gets the case data from Salesforce and then runs we had it as a nightly type batch job to retrieve cases from the spoke org and update that with the hub. So it was more of a batch integration on a schedule. We have use the MuleSoft scheduler component, and then within the hub receiving org, we created a bulk API request to the hub org that then scheduled that within Salesforce. The bulk API will create within Salesforce its own batch scheduled job. So then you can also monitor that within Salesforce what was successfully upserted or created through each of those runs. So not only do we have the component of being able to schedule it within MuleSoft, but also have Salesforce have that visibility to the batch as it's coming through from MuleSoft and the bulk API. All right, next slide. Here's our final one here where it wasn't a MuleSoft really integration. It's more point-to-point Salesforce Connect with that cross-org adapter. We just wanted to include this as detail for this type of integration where MuleSoft isn't needed, but yet it can be achieved through Salesforce.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one, like we said, this is not actually an integration in the strict sense of the word, because we are not moving any data anywhere, right? So using Salesforce Connect and cross-org adapters, if you are in any hub org, you can view the activities or whatever objects you want in other Salesforce orgs. So since it's only a view-only thing and you don't really need to move data, you don't need MuleSoft per se for those use cases. All right. So yeah. So again, don't ask me and Brett too many questions about this because we don't know. Our Salesforce team helped out in this one. Yeah. So now we're just get into the key findings and design consideration. We learned a lot in this proof of concept, right? So the first thing was a canonical data model, including the standardizations for the Salesforce components is required. Like this whole thing works based on a good canonical data model. So if you have all your Salesforce instances in your different LOBs, which are very highly customized and deviate a lot from standards, this thing will be tough, right? So like I said, we had to create a few custom objects, but by and large, we tried to use things that came standard in Salesforce or came standard as part of the Financial Services Cloud instance of Salesforce. And if you wanted to integrate with Client Master, where you wanted to send data to the hub, and then you have to, you want to send that data updates through all the spoke models, then you should have a client database that is capable of triggering events. So that's kind of an important requirement for this this specific design to work. Then you can adapt it if you don't have that. Salesforce, yeah. So I think our biggest lesson in Salesforce was everything to do with these CDC events, right? They are change data capture events. They are not platform events. We had a couple of use cases that used them. You saw them. First of all, they're triggered automatically, right? And then not everything will trigger them. So if you have encrypted fields or formula fields in Salesforce, they do not trigger CDC events. So then you have to create a duplicate and then get it to trigger. So that was a little bit of a mess. Some objects do not generate CDC events at all, right? So that's another issue. And then the biggest one that we had to deal with is that they do not come in order. So because they're like triggers, they come within sub-seconds. So, if someone, there's a very good chance that you may have to have some logic that you want to put in to handle out of order events. So it was just something that was causes a lot of heartache in our POC, but we got through that. MuleSoft. Okay, so I think the first sentence is consider integration layer complexity when designing overall solution. This is just a general observation that when you are on a Salesforce project, the majority of people on that project are going to be Salesforce developers, architects, and you'll have a few MuleSoft people in there. And generally, they tend to think of MuleSoft as an enabling layer, all the architecture and design decisions are completely made with Salesforce in mind. MuleSoft is considered quote unquote plumbing. So when we got in there, we had to really be like, guys, this whole hub and spoke architecture is an integration architecture first and foremost. So even though, it is Salesforce. So just make sure that the integration design is given as much thought as the Salesforce design, and it's not considered an afterthought. Consider connectivity mechanism when you are determining your integration patterns. One thing we noticed was that to connect to, when we went to do platform events, we the way for MuleSoft to connect was you had to IP whitelist, means we had to have static IPs. Now we know in a cloud hub environment, static IPs are a finite resource. So you cannot just willy-nilly ask for IPs every time, you put in a new Mule component, you whitelist with Salesforce. So we had to end up again doing a proxy kind of thing that that we only whitelisted the IP for the proxy, and then all our connectivity went through that. So that was something to consider. It does affect design connectivity. And then this, I don't think we need to tell this audience this, but this was more a learning for our project partners who are not used to APIs. So consider loosely coupled reusable APIs, smart endpoints, dump pipes, because by default, the idea is to go to smart pipes, right? Just bunch of point-to-point, very heavy transformation kind of integrations, which we all know are very quick and easy to implement when you're doing it, but maintenance is a nightmare going down the road. So yeah, there might be a little bit of a, do the effort up front to create these reusable components, and it'll pay off later. And definitely, last but not the least, consider long-term governance and ownership of integration artifacts, right? So just like your APIs and your Mule applications, who is going to own them and maintaining going forward? Because it's an integration, it can always be like, it's always middleman and always blamed for anything that goes wrong. But yeah, so that's something, and that's what APIs makes it easier, because if you have an API on top of your backend system, then you try to say the governance lies with that team that owns the system that has the API on top of it. Versus if you just did a point-to-point, then you don't have a very clear owner in that case. So those were our main learnings and design considerations. So we will open it up for any questions.
Hey, Maria, thank you. That was a good presentation, and we do have some questions on the chat. Let me start with the first one. Harbin says, for cases where we are pushing data from all spokes into Hub and the data is stored twice, could we use some external data sources or OData to like virtually access that data from spokes instead of like pushing that to everywhere?
Correct. Yes. So that is interesting. So this was a proof of concept, right? Like, so this was while we were doing this, we had our Salesforce architects and everybody later on decide, hey, nobody considered volume of the data, right? So for referrals and things like that, it's fine. But when you get into the client master that's like millions of records. So we were like, do we want to have all of them? Do we want to have some of them? Do we even really need to move the data? So I can't get into much details now because, this is client information, but we are, revisiting. This is a proof of concept. So in real life, yes, we do have a Hub database now. So for the use cases, it's not MuleSoft, it's not Salesforce Hub for some cases, not for all of it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
The other follow-up probably on that one, can you elaborate more on choosing the platform events over push topics or CDC? I think you had CDC, but push topics, you said no. So what was the reasons behind those?
Brett, you want to take that? He had a lot of pain to deal with that.
Yeah, platform events were definitely more reliable when it comes to the whole smart pipe or dumb pipe type issue. With CDC, we have found that there's still a need to, based on the data that you're trying to upsert. If it comes out of order, then the record wouldn't be there to upsert or to reference even in the Salesforce order, because it was out of order. The order of operation had to be maintained. So CDC became kind of cumbersome, more or less always trying to rely on MuleSoft to keep that order of operation. The push topics side of the house was more around some of our technology and the available at the customer side as well. Just using Kafka was another challenge that we fell into. Push topics, so we found platform events really to be the most ease of use, I guess I'd say, across all of the three. Maria, did you insight push topics?
Yeah, push topics, we never even went too much. Like, we had one discussion on it, and we had MuleSoft come in, and even they were like, yeah, platform events are newer. Do not worry too much about push topics. CDC events, on the other hand, one major difference between CDC and platform events is CDC events are all like in one Salesforce org, all the CDC events will be on one topic, right? So if it's like a customer or an account or anything, all those events are on one single topic. So you could get a bunch of events that you're not even interested in. Whereas platform events, every Salesforce object has its own little topic. So much control over those. So if anyone says CDC events, just do a POC is all we're saying, because there is a lot there too.
Yeah, I mean, it could depend on your use case. You know, if it's just something that you're not worried about the maintaining that relationship of your data on or something, it may just, and you're just kind of just transferring data from one to the next based on the CDC, it may work for you, but just for our relationship of data, which created the challenge with us in the order of operations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So it sounds like it's more of a use case basis, what works for you, right?
Yeah.
In there.
Totally.
That's good. So Edgar is asking, when we use all these events, should we be aware of any limitations around volume requests or topics when we are integrating these things?
Not from a MuleSoft perspective, but from Salesforce perspective, yes. Salesforce has some governor limits. Not something we had to worry about too much, but yeah, there is potentially a limit that you can hit. And then that would affect your costs, licensing and stuff. From a MuleSoft perspective, not really. It wasn't something that, I mean, you can, yeah, it's not something we considered.
Yeah, probably you may not hit that in POC, but in real use case, depends on how much you are consuming, right?
Yeah, it would, but like these are like, UI user driven. So it's not like hundreds and thousands of TPS, right?
Okay.
Something reasonable, like some human being is actually doing something. So it's
okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so it's manageable.
Okay.
Except for CDC events through the database. That's when we revisited that whole thing.
Okay. Next question, Tejas. Is there any SFDC quotas to be mindful of? I guess it's the same question like previous. So unless it is not the case, Tejas, feel free to add on the chat or elaborate on that question. Hardik is asking, did you use any queues like Anypoint MQ or JMS queues, or it was all just platform event good enough? Okay.
Enough, yeah. Platform events for this use case, yeah, we didn't need anything else. Because I mean, we at one point there was Kafka, and then we were like, why? It's not required, so then we took it out. So yeah.
Okay, that's it. Next one is probably a comment from Jesus. There are only two hard problems in distributed system: guaranteed order of message and exactly once delivery. I think most of us have feel that pain of distributed system when delivery is important. Yeah.
Right.
Whitney is asking, you mentioned when we were talking about the MuleSoft, you mentioned MuleSoft is the plumbing. So can you elaborate on that? How MuleSoft was just a plumbing to Salesforce and ensure that integration component was not an afterthought? Little elaboration on that part.
Lots of education, lots of talking, lots of convincing goes in that. It's just, so I think what we want to do is we want to push this API-led connectivity, right, to the client. So as much like I know MuleSoft does a good job, the Catalyst things and all that. I mean, I'm a big proponent of API-led connectivity. So if you can have some sessions with your clients, just to educate them, hey, you have an integration platform. Just don't think of it as something, I just connect this dot to this dot, right? That's it, right? Hey, I just want to get data from this Salesforce to this database. Why do I have to? What is APIs going to do here, right? So for me, even in the POC, it was a challenge to introduce that one referral API. I think me and the Salesforce architect talked for 3 days just for me to convince him. So it's just draw lots of pictures is what I would say, educate them on the MuleSoft's concept of APIs, and they'll see the value. Unless there's really no value, then it's fine. But there usually is value in doing it. But yeah. That's
true. All right. I think I see one more last question there. How reliable is platform event? Jesus is asking. How reliable?
Brett, you want to take that?
I never saw any issues really for reliability with platform events. Not through the POC, no.
Okay. Because, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, Salesforce even stores them for 3 days. So, and you can replay them based on replay IDs and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't really think that reliability is an issue with platform events.
Okay. Because Jesus is saying they got some issues from time to time. So maybe if you add those issues, Jesus, we could all be aware of those issues, but looks like they didn't get it. I don't see any other questions on the chat. I will add one from myself. When you were showing the reference APIs and when Hub is sending data to other Spoke or Spoke is sending to Hub, was that all like a fire and forget on the platform event? You put a message and then forget about it? Or there was some mechanism to ensure later, maybe go back and check the consistency that whatever was pushed there somehow made to the end destination? Was there any claim check or something, anything there?
There was, because I mean, so in the moment they will put the thing on the platform event and they'll forget about it. But remember that we do have, once you call the referral API returns some IDs of this is the ID of the referral in the hub, this is the ID of the referral in the destination, and then you take that and write it back to Salesforce, right? So it's just that this is not a blocking thing for Salesforce to just put the event and they move away. But eventually, if someone's like, hey, did this referral even make it to so-and-so? They can always go and check and be like, yeah, it did. And if the other or a business says, hey, we didn't get it, they'll be like, here's the ID. You should find it in your system. So yeah, there was IDs passed back and forth for sure.
Okay, that makes sense. I think those are the all questions. Is anybody have any more questions? Feel free to add on the chat. We'll wait for some time. Angel, Adam, you guys want to add anything while we wait for any question?
Yeah, I need to add a quick shout out to Sabrina Marechal, Sabrina Hoke, and Mariana Lemus, because they are the ones organizing the whole meetups globally. And I'm putting here just a quick advertisement, because if you want to become a leader and get any of this track, this is all Mariana Lemus' fault. You can apply here now, very Uncle Sam style. Apply here now, and you can become a meetup leader. That was it. Sorry for the advertisement.
No, those are the power behind all this community thing. So, yay! I think we don't have any more questions here. So, let me see one last thing. No, thanks, Nita, for asking that question. Yes, recording will be available, and as usual, like all other online meetups that we had, recording will be available on the same event page, hopefully by tomorrow. It takes some time to process and get that recording available, and we will post it back on the event page so you can revisit and catch up anything that you may have missed. Any other questions? Anything, anyone? No.
People are commenting on jacket, but whose jacket are they?
Look behind Angel.
Yeah, you have to apply and become a MuleSoft meetup leader, right? And in the region, and then you get the jacket. It's not that easy, guys.
Some hard work is needed there. And I'm sure Angel must be having more things on the other side of the desk. If he flips his camera, you're gonna see a big store of the goodies now.
Yeah, we can wardrobe.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think if we don't have question, we can give some time back. Angel, thoughts?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, Monique.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this almost 2-hour session. Thank you, Maria, Brett, and Adam. Those were excellent presentations, lot of content, and lot of nature and technology, and like a lot of mix we got to see today, right? Like from plants and everything. It was really interesting content we saw there. Angel,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, speakers, once again.
Good.
Thank you very much, folks. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.
Yes,
Thanks, Maria.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye. Thanks, Brett.